Okay, I need you to picture this with me. A woman walks into a room full of people who spent 3 years telling her she was nothing. She sits down. She picks up a pen. Signs her name on a divorce document without her hand shaking even once. Then slides it across the table like she's returning a receipt for something she never actually wanted. No tears. No outburst. No scene. The Kang family sat there watching her, and honestly, they were almost disappointed. They'd been waiting for this moment for years. The moment she'd finally crack. Finally beg. Finally show them what they'd always believed about her. That without their name, without their money, without their approval, she was absolutely nothing. She stood up, buttoned her coat, and said just one sentence before she walked out. 7 words. And none of them understood what those 7 words meant. Until 38 minutes later, when a private jet with no commercial markings landed 2 miles away, and the phones in that building started going off at the same time. I'm going to tell you exactly what she said. But first, I need to tell you who she actually was. Because the version of this woman the Kang family thought they knew, that person never existed. Not even for a single day. Stay with me. This story goes places I promise you are not expecting. Her name was Yoon Seo-yeon. And if you'd walked into the Kang family's main residence 3 years before this story begins and asked anyone there to describe her in one word, you'd have gotten the same answer from all of them. Invisible. Not cruel. Not problematic. Not even particularly interesting. Just invisible. The kind of woman wealthy families collect sometimes. A daughter-in-law who arrived without connections, without a family name worth mentioning, and who seemed perfectly content to remain grateful for the privilege of being there at all. Min-jun, the second son of the Kang Group empire, had married her against his mother's very specific, very vocal objections. His mother had been in the middle of arranging something more suitable. The daughter of a textile family with a history of beneficial mergers. When Min-jun had returned from a business trip abroad with a ring and a woman nobody had approved, his mother never forgave either of them for that. But she was patient. She could wait. She gave Seo-yeon the smallest responsibilities in the company. The reports nobody read. The divisions already earmarked for restructuring. If something went wrong anywhere near Seo-yeon's desk, the blame found her quickly and left everyone else alone. And Seo-yeon never fought it. She absorbed it. Said very little. Showed up early, stayed late, and did exactly what was asked. 3 years of this. And here's the detail that should have broken the whole illusion wide open. But nobody in that family ever thought to ask about it. Every night, after the house went dark and Min-jun had gone to sleep in a different wing entirely, Seo-yeon sat alone at a laptop in her study and worked. Not on Kang Group reports. Not on anything connected to the family at all. On something else. Something with a name that, if you typed it into any major financial search platform in Asia, would have shown you a graph trending in one direction only. But nobody ever asked what she was working on at. Now, before I get to the divorce meeting, and what she actually said when she walked out, I need to tell you about the phone call she made 6 months before any of this happened. Because that phone call is the reason a jet appeared on that runway. And when you find out who was on the other end of it, you're going to understand that this wasn't a revenge plan. This was something she'd been building since before she ever married into this family at all. Don't go anywhere. 6 months before the divorce, Seo-yeon is sitting in a hotel room in Singapore, a business trip, officially for a minor vendor negotiation that Min-jun's team sent her on precisely because it wasn't important enough for anyone they actually valued. She orders room service, opens her laptop, and makes a video call. The person on the other end isn't in Korea. Isn't in Asia. He's in a building in Luxembourg that doesn't have his name on it anywhere, which is exactly how he prefers it. His name is Daniel Wu, and he spent the last 15 years building something most people in the public financial world have never heard of, which is also exactly how he prefers it. Seo-yeon and Daniel Wu had grown up 3 streets apart. His father and her father had been business partners. 2 men who'd built a logistics company from almost nothing in the early 2000s. Before a larger conglomerate had come in during a cash crisis and acquired their debt at the worst possible moment, walking away with their assets, their client relationships, and effectively, everything they'd spent a decade building. That conglomerate had a name. You already know what it was. Seo-yun and Daniel had made a decision together at her father's funeral. She would have been 22, he was 24. That one day they would rebuild what was taken. Not out of spite. Out of something quieter and more patient than spite. Something that required waiting. Positioning. Getting close enough to understand exactly how the machinery worked before you decided where to reach in and stop it. She married into the Kang family 14 months after that funeral. She spent 3 years learning everything she needed to learn. Not from the meetings they invited her to, but from the ones they didn't bother keeping her out of because they'd already decided she wasn't worth worrying about. By the time she called Daniel from that Singapore hotel room, she wasn't asking him to start something. She was telling him they were ready to finish it. Here's what I want you to understand about what comes next, because this is where the story stops being about a divorce and starts being about something much bigger. The Kang family had no idea what was about to happen. But there was one person, one single person inside that company, who had figured out something was wrong 3 weeks earlier. And instead of going to the family, he went to Seo-yun. I'll tell you who that was, and what he showed her, right after I tell you what happened in that conference room. Because the signing? That's where everything finally went live. And that 7-word sentence she said on her way out the door? I haven't forgotten. We're almost there. The morning of the divorce. The Kang family arrived in a convoy, 3 cars for lawyers and Minjun's mother, who had apparently chosen to attend wearing the kind of outfit people wear when they want to make clear they've already won. She sat at the head of the table even though it wasn't her divorce, which told you everything you needed to know about whose meeting everyone believed this was. Seo-yun arrived alone. No lawyers of her own. At least, none that anyone in that room could see. She sat down, accepted a cup of tea she didn't drink, and waited while the Kang family's lead attorney read the settlement terms out loud with the slow, deliberate satisfaction of someone who knows they hold all the cards. No alimony. No property stake. No continued access to any company accounts, vehicles, or residences. A single lump sum payment the attorney described as generous given the circumstances. An amount that, relative to the Kang Group's actual net worth, was the financial equivalent of checking someone's coat at a hotel and handing them a tip. She read every page herself. Asked 2 questions about a specific clause in Section 4 that made the attorney pause, because they were not the questions of someone who didn't understand what she was signing. They were the questions of someone who needed to confirm exactly one specific thing before she proceeded. Then she signed. All 7 pages. Slid it back. Minjun's mother let out a sound. Not quite a laugh. More like the exhale of someone releasing something they'd been holding for 3 years. I always knew, she said, that you'd leave quietly. You simply don't have the backbone for anything else. Seo-yun stood, buttoned her coat, picked up her bag, and at the door, she turned back and said the 7 words I told you about at the start. Have someone watch the financial news today. That's it. That's all she said. His mother actually smiled. She thought it was a bluff. The desperate, last-second threat of a woman with no cards left to play. She was still smiling 41 minutes later when her phone rang, and everything she thought she knew about her family's empire collapsed in a single conversation. What happened on that phone call? I'm going to tell you everything. But I need to stop here for 1 second because there's something most people don't know about what Heron Global actually was. Not just who was behind it. What it had already done, quietly, invisibly over 5 years, to the companies around Kang Group. Because by the time that jet landed, this wasn't just about the Kang family anymore. There were 4 other conglomerates, 3 government-adjacent contracts, and 1 very specific person at the Korean Financial Regulatory Office who was about to have a very bad afternoon. This is the part that goes from business to survival. And you need to know this before we get to what Minjun did next, because what he did next almost changed everything. The name Heron Global Holdings had existed in financial databases for 6 years. If you'd searched it, and almost nobody did, which was the entire point, you'd have found a quiet, unremarkable investment group registered in Luxembourg with secondary offices in Singapore and Toronto. Clean filings. Modest-looking positions in a diverse range of Asian mid-cap companies. And this is the part that should genuinely make you stop and think about the patience involved. Until the morning of the divorce, when every position was simultaneously exercised, and Heron Global's effective control of Kang Group's primary holding structure was activated. Not hostile. Not dramatic. Just done. Filed. Confirmed. Irreversible by the time anyone in the Kang boardroom opened their phones. Now here's what made it survival level for the Kang family, not just business. 2 of the contracts Heron Global now controlled were government infrastructure partnerships. That meant government people had to be notified of the change in controlling interest. And government people notifying other government people meant that within 24 hours of that filing going live, a regulatory review was triggered. A review that would look very carefully at how those contracts had been awarded in the first place. The Kang family's problems had just stopped being about a woman who left with nothing. They were now about what an official government review might find when it started going through records that, until this morning, had been perfectly safe from scrutiny. Minjun called his father 17 times in the first hour. His father, for the first time in Minjun's life, didn't pick up. Now, Minjun's mother, the woman who'd sat at that table and smiled at Seo Yun, made a move at this point that I did not see coming when I first heard this story. And honestly, neither did Seo Yun. It didn't come from the boardroom. It didn't come from their lawyers. It came from somewhere else entirely. And for about 72 hours, it looked like it might actually work. The next part of this story is where it stops being about money and power, and becomes something much more personal and much more dangerous. So I really need you to stay with me. On the 3rd day after the filing, Seo Yun noticed the car. Black. No plates she recognized. Parked outside her apartment building when she left at 7 in the morning. Still there when she returned at 9 that night. She didn't say anything. Just photographed the license plate and sent it to 2 people. 2 days after that, a formal audit request arrived. Filed against her personally by an anonymous complainant, alleging financial irregularities in her individual accounts over the past 3 years. It was fabricated. She knew it was fabricated. But fabricated or not, a personal audit request meant delays. Attention. The kind of noise that makes institutional investors nervous and makes people quietly start asking questions they didn't ask before. Then the story started. Whispers in Seoul's business community. A source, always anonymous, always described as close to the situation, suggesting that the capital behind Heron Global hadn't come from clean places. That Seo Yun's connection to Daniel Wu was worth looking at more carefully. Nothing published yet. Just circulating. Just enough to muddy the water. It was Minjun's mother who'd made the call. To a man named Director Choi. A former investigator turned private operative who'd spent 20 years making problems disappear for families who could afford his rate. He was good. He'd made larger problems than this one go away without leaving fingerprints. For 72 hours, Seo Yun's team was absorbing pressure from 3 directions at once. Legal, reputational, physical surveillance. Anyone watching from the outside might have thought the Kang family was actually mounting a genuine comeback. Then Seo Yun made a phone call that went international. Not to Daniel. To someone Daniel had introduced her to 4 years earlier. A woman named Margaret Chen, who ran an institutional fund out of Hong Kong and who had, over that same 4-year period, become one of Heron Global's 3 largest capital partners. She told Margaret what was happening in 2 sentences. Margaret's response was 4 words. Send me the names. Within 48 hours, 2 of the Kang family's longest-standing international business partnerships, relationships that predated Minjun's father's own tenure, relationships that the family genuinely believed were untouchable, sent formal notices of withdrawal. No explanation given. No negotiation offered. Just done. Director Choi's audit request was quietly withdrawn the following morning. The car outside her building was gone before she woke up. The Kang family had just learned something that no amount of money in Korea could have taught them. Seo Yun's protection wasn't local. It wasn't even regional. And the people standing behind her had decided, entirely on their own, that anyone who came at her was also, by definition, coming at them. This wasn't a divorce anymore. This was a demonstration of something the Kang family had never actually encountered before. A wall they genuinely could not get through. Everything I've told you so far, the signing, the jet, the takeover, the counterattack, all of that is the setup. I know that sounds wild given everything we've already been through in this story, but I need you to hear me when I say the final meeting is where this becomes something else entirely. Because Seo-yeon walked back into that conference room one last time. And what she said, and more importantly what she didn't say, is the part of this story I genuinely cannot stop thinking about. 2 more minutes. Stay right there. 3 weeks after the divorce. Same building. Same conference room. This time, Seo-yeon sat at the head of the table. The Kang family arrived without their lawyers. A detail that meant more than it might seem, because a family like the Kangs never walked into any serious meeting without legal representation, unless they were walking in to surrender, not negotiate. Minjun's father, the patriarch, the man who'd built the first version of this empire, sat down across from the woman his son had married and dismissed, and asked the question that had clearly been eating him for 3 weeks. Not about the company, not about the regulatory review, something else. Here's the part of this story that I haven't been able to let go of since I first heard it. At no point, not once, did Seo-yeon do anything dramatic. No confrontations in hallways. No leaked documents to the press. No public statements. She didn't even tell her own story while it was happening. She just moved. Quietly. Precisely. Like someone who had spent so long being underestimated that she'd learned to use the invisibility itself as a tool. And I keep thinking about that detail. That the Kang family lost everything not because they had a powerful enemy, but because they never once considered that the woman in the room with them might actually be the most powerful person in it. So here's what I genuinely want to know from you. And I'm not asking rhetorically. I read these comments, I want the actual answer. When Seo-yeon walked out of that final meeting, was that justice? Or was there a part of you watching this story that thought she gave them too easy an exit? Because some of you are going to say she was exactly right. Return the math to 0, and walk away clean. But some of you are thinking something different right now. Something about what Minjun's mother said that last day. And whether any part of it deserved a harder answer. Tell me which side you're on. Because I've seen this story from 3 different angles now, and honestly, I'm still not sure I've made up my mind. Drop it in the comments. I'll be reading every single one.